Right. Okay. Let's start and talk about Sanhedrin. Let's get the Gemarah up on the screen straight away. Oh, it would help if I had it on the screen myself. 1 second. There it is. Okay. Why you all gone over there? Why have you gone over there? Oh, gosh. This is very confusing now. You've all disappeared on me. You can see my screen, right? But I can't because you are on it. Now, maybe I can move you now. Yeah, that's better. I can move you to the other screen. Right. Okay, we're back on track. So, you will remember...
Got the Gemarah that's on there.
You've got the Gemarah on?
No.
What have you got on there?
Desktop notes.
No, you don't want that. Let's try again. Ah, that's it. There we go. Now you've got the Gemarah.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry about that. You will remember that in the end of the bottom of the last page, we spoke about the things that you needed to do to be in the Sanhedrin. Here we go. It's on the screen in the middle there. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, we said, Ein moshivin b'Sanhedrin, ela bale koma, you had to be tall, bale chochma, you had to be wise, bale mare, you had to be good looking, bale zikna, you had to be mature, ubale kshafim, you had to know witchcraft, v'yodim b'shivim lashon, and you had to know 70 languages. Why? Shelo tehei Sanhedrin shomat mipi hamaturgaman, so that the Sanhedrin itself did not have to hear evidence via a translator, an interpreter. And we spoke about that in some length. So you would understand from that, wouldn't you, that anybody on the Sanhedrin, in other words, all 23 in a small Sanhedrin or all 71 in a large Sanhedrin, has to have all of those requirements, because it says Ein moshivim b'Sanhedrin ella. Ein ella means only. Yes, Julia.
I looked up, because 70 languages seems an awful lot for a small country, though I'm aware that there's lots of little subdivisions. But I looked it up. Apparently nowadays there are 198 countries in the world and over 7,000 languages. I'm still not sure that 70 isn't over-egging the pudding.
Okay, so basically your question is, where did they get that 70 from? Right? The answer is that 70 is a big number. And it represents the Midrash tells us that at the time of the Tower of Babel, when all the languages were mixed up, you remember that story? They were building this tower to the sky, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu said, "Can't have that because that's not a good thing for them to try and make a name for themselves. Let's mess them all up." And they messed up all their languages so that one person couldn't understand another. The Midrash tells us there that Kodesh Baruch Hu at that point created 70 languages. Now, I don't think that 70 necessarily means 70 literally. Like you, I think it is I think it's really an expression that means all the local languages, all the languages that there might possibly be. Now, if you were to live in the UK today, you would probably need to know quite a lot of languages, because we, or they, I should say, not me, I don't count myself as part of that anymore, thank God. They are what they call a multicultural society, and they have all sorts of different languages going on, and so you'd have to know quite a lot. But I don't think we should get too hung up on the number of 70. I think, although, I mean, there are opinions that say, yes, there were 70 languages, and yes, they do need to know all 70. But I think that what it is telling us is that they have to be able to hear the evidence directly. Now, that's what we would think from where we are now.
Could have been that each of the judges had one language, maybe. Each of the 70 had one language.
Okay, so you're saying that the whole Sanhedrin as a whole had to know 70 languages. Okay, well, that's an interesting comment, because you'll see in a minute when we come to the piece of Gemarah that we're going to do today that it's not as straightforward as it looks at this point. At this point, I understood, Johnny understood it differently, but I understood this to mean that you had to, in order to be on the Sanhedrin at all, you had to know these 70 languages. And I understood that this piece of Gemarah to mean that all 71 members, or all 23 members if it was a small Sanhedrin, needed to know the 70 languages. That's how I understood that piece of Gemarah. Johnny seems to have understood it differently, that the 70 languages needed to be known between them. What do you all think? What's your view on at this point, Michael? What do you think?
After the Sanhedrin of 23, they'd have to know a few each. Have to know a few languages each.
I think you need, it needs to be more than one person. I think a majority of the people need to know each language. So therefore, they don't need to know 70 in total, but at least one or two judges can't sway the rest of them, because they believe they're hearing something different when they translate it. Right.
So you say that a few of them at least, or most of them, I think you said, needed to know all the languages, the majority. Okay, yeah. Avril, what do you think? I can't hear you. We can't hear you. Okay. We'll you try and get some sound, and we'll come back to you. Julia, what do you think?
Well, in between, really. I mean, I know somebody who can speak 11 or now 12 languages. I don't think it's possible for somebody to know 70 languages. I think it has to be more than one, probably. I was thinking about it, and I reckon that maybe a minimum of 3 judges have to speak, had to cover each language.
Okay, now that's interesting. Why did you say 3? Where did you get that figure from out of the top of your head?
Well, it was based on the discussions that we've had before, that you can't have even numbers and it can't be a minimum of 1. So I came up with 3. Which,
okay, very good. Okay, hold that thought. Art, do you have a view on this?
Well, I think that, first of all, a lot of languages, like you said, we don't know if it's 70, but I believe that each one has to be able to understand as much as possible, because if you have 70 people understanding 70 languages, they're not all going to be the same fluency anyway. So you really can't say they're all going to understand everything. So it's just a matter of a spectrum in any event. So I think that the theory is that they should at least be familiar with them.
Okay, that all of those things that you have all said are all very valid points. And I have to be honest that when I read this Gemarah the first time, none of those things occurred to me, because I didn't think about it. I just read the Gemarah and said, okay, you've got to know 70 languages to be on the Sanhedrin. But when we turn over the page and we come to the Gemarah that we are now going to deal with, which is over here, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, we will see that it is not exactly as it seems. There are various different opinions. I need to let these people in the waiting room. Hang on. Where we go. There are various different opinions as to what this means. So let's have a look at our Gemarah now. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says, in the name of Rav, Kol Ir, any city, she'ein ba shnayim ledaber ve'echad lishmoa, ein moshivin ba Sanhedrin. Okay, so Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says that in order to have a Sanhedrin, at least 2 of those members of the Sanhedrin need to be able to speak that language fluently, and one of them has to be able to understand the language, even if he can't speak it. How many of you here with us speak Hebrew? Okay. How many of you understand Hebrew? No? Well,
it is easier than speaking it.
yeah. So, for example, my better half understands probably 80 to 90% of what is said to her in Hebrew. But I cannot for the life of me get her to speak a word because she's too English and too shy and too scared of making a mistake. So she won't do it. But she understands. So she would fit the Echad Lishma bit of here. So according to Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, you cannot have a Sanhedrin in a city unless you have 2 speakers and 1 person who understands. So there's your 3, Julia. So that's very, very interesting. Now, he goes on to say the following: Uva Beitar, and in the city of Beitar, Havu Shlosha, there were 3. I think by that he means 3 people who spoke all the languages. Okay. Uba Yavne, and in Yavne there were Arba'ah, there were 4. Now, what is special about Beitar and Yavne that they are specifically mentioned here, do you think? Let's take Beitar first. Why is Beitar mentioned here?
There were places where they had the courts.
Well, they had a court in every city, if you remember.
Yeah.
And in fact, the next piece of Gemarah, Johnny, is going to tell us that how many people you need in a city to have a Sanhedrin. So every city who had a certain number, I won't spoil it for you by telling you that number. So it wasn't just that they had a Sanhedrin. There was something special about Beitar. What was special about Beitar?
Places of learning?
No, we'll come back to that when we talk about Yavne. Okay, give me the same answer when I ask you about Yavne. Okay, Beitar. What was special about Beitar? David, you any idea why Beitar is mentioned here?
Is that a Kohen city or?
No.
The size of the city, it was absolutely huge.
Yeah, exactly. It was enormous. Beitar was a huge city. And that is why it's mentioned here. And in that huge city, I mean, if you believe the numbers, we're talking, hundreds of thousands of people in Beitar. You know my views on numbers, so we won't go into that. But it was a big city by all accounts. Okay, and in that enormous city of Beitar, probably the biggest city in Judea at that time, there were only 3 people who could speak all 70 languages. So that's why Beitar is mentioned. Now, I will ask Michael Krauss the next question. Why does it mention Yavne?
Place of learning.
It was the place of learning. Yavne was the place where all the Chachamim hung out. It was where the Sanhedrin, the main Sanhedrin, was after the destruction of the temple. And there, amongst all those clever folk, there were only 4. So our Gemarah up the page or over the page, where it said you couldn't sit on a Sanhedrin unless you knew 70 languages, at least according Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, is not the case. It doesn't mean that everybody had to do it, because even in Beitar, this enormous city, there were only 3 people. And in Yavne, this incredibly clever place, the Oxbridge of Israel, they only had 4 people who could do it. So very interesting that they mentioned these 2 places, one for size and one for scholarship. Okay, now the Gemarah is very interestingly telling us who these 4 people were in Yavne who knew all these languages. And here they are: Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva, and Shimon Hatimni. Dan lifneihem bakarka. Shimon Hatimni. Where is Teman?
Yemen.
Yemen, correct. So Shimon the Yemenite. Dan lifneihem. He, Dan, what's that mean?
Judge.
He judged. Doesn't actually mean judge, but you're right. It does mean judge, but you're correct. The translation of Dan is judge, but it doesn't mean that here. Dan lifneihem bakarka. He
on the ground, something on the ground.
Deliberated in front of them on the ground. What are we talking about here? When first of all, who is Shimon Hatimni? Second question, why is he not Rav or Rabbi Shimon Hatimni? He's obviously a clever bloke. He understands 70 languages, and he is judging or deliberating in front of the Sanhedrin here. Who is he? And why did he not get a title?
I think the Yemenites sat on the ground cross-legged, like the Arabs do.
Okay, so you think that he sat on the ground because he's a Taimani?
Yeah, didn't sit on a chair.
Well, they had the rows of people in front of the main Sanhedrin facing them. The rows that would be promoted if one of the Sanhedrin guys left. So
yeah,
they were like the audience.
Yeah, they were. That's correct. So the Sanhedrin, well, not necessarily the Sanhedrin guys, but the Talmidei Chachamim, the Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, who's ever been to a massive Haredi do where you're either a Haredi wedding or a big Haredi? Oh no, Julia's got a sour look on her face. She doesn't want to go to one of those. Who has ever been? You must have been to a big do, a big frummy do, Johnny.
Yeah.
And where do their Rosh Yeshivas sit?
On the top table.
And where is the top table?
The top table is where the higher up on the pedals.
It's raised up on a dais.
Yes.
Or I don't know how you say that word. D-A-I-S. How do you pronounce that word?
Kind of like a platform, a dais.
Yeah, it's a dais. Dais. I don't know how you say that word. Dais. Thank you very much, Julia.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, they sat on one of those. And that comes from here. Because what used to happen was that when the yeshivas, the institutions of learning, specifically, we're talking Yavne, we mentioned Yavne, particularly in Yavne, how did that work? Well, you had the big knackers, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rabbi Akivas, the Rabbi Eliezer, and the Rabbi Yeshuas. They sat slightly raised up. They sat on cushions. You're right, they didn't sit on chairs. They sat on cushions, but they were raised up. The next lot down, their students who they were teaching sat on the floor, and as Art said, they sat in rows. Okay, and the nearer the front you got, the closer you were to the Rebbe, meaning that the higher you were considered to be the Talmid Chacham. And then when one of those Rosh Yeshiva places were vacated for whatever reason, one of the front rowers would take their place. So that is how it worked. So when it says Shimon Hatimni Dan Lifneihem Bakarka, it means that he was in the front row on the ground. He wasn't one of them yet, which is perhaps the answer to why he wasn't Rebbe Shimon Hatimni. The notes that I read said that he was a child genius, this Shimon Hatimni, and he wasn't old enough to get smicha. And that's why he wasn't called Rebbe. He was one of these, you read it in the Art Scroll biographies of the great rabbis. They knew the whole of Shas by the time they were 6 months old, that kind of stuff. Michael has noted a note of cynicism in my description there. Well done, Michael. Okay. So anyway, this is the idea of Dan Lifneihem Bakarka. So rubbish. So this, yes, David.
So I just wanted to add a note. Rashi says that Timni is associated with a town called Tibna, which is located between Bet Shemesh and Yavne.
Okay,
And
don't answer this question.
And it was the largest town in the area.
Okay, so he wasn't a Taimani, that's good. He was from Timnah. David, you're banned from answering this question, at least at first. Where do we find Timnah in the Torah and the Tanakh? I expect you to at least know one place where we know Timnah, because we've all learned it together. Art, you're accepted from this, and so is Martin, because you didn't learn it with us because you weren't with us when we did it. But the rest of you have learnt it. Where is Timnah in Tanakh? Anyone?
Somewhere in the prophet section.
I'll give you a clue. It's in Sefer Shoftim. I'll give you another clue. Somebody went and got a wife down there. Oh dear, oh dear. Okay, I'll give you another clue. You'll get it now. He was rather strong, this fellow.
Samson.
Shimshon, very good.
Shimshon.
Shimshon went to Timnah. Timnah is a place that Shimshon went down to, and that's where we have learnt that together. Okay, so Shimon over here, not Shimshon. Shimon was from Timnah. Thank you for that, David.
Okay.
And he was a child prodigy, according to some Meforshim, and he was on the front row at a very young age before he got smicha.
Rashi actually says the name of the place is Tibna, not Timnah.
Tibna.
Yeah.
Is that the same place as our Timnah, do you think?
Don't know.
Where did he say it was? Between Beit Shemesh and Yavne?
Yeah.
Well, that would fit, wouldn't it? Because Shimshon hung around the Bet Shemesh area. So it would fit. And it would be a bit odd. Well, Bet and Mem are one of those letters that are a bit interchangeable.
Yeah.
I think we'll go for Timnah because he's called a Timni. So I think Rashi saying Tibna, I think it could also be Timnah. Very good. Very interesting. Right. Anyway.
Where's the first Timnah in the Tanakh?
Yehuda.
Before that.
Oh, before that. Okay.
Yeah.
First, go on.
Timnah hayta pilegesh le'Eliphaz. Oh,
I wouldn't have got that.
Next week's parsha.
Oh, well, that's because you've already learned your laning, is it?
No, it's next week.
Oh, it's next week. Okay, you don't do it ahead of time. I would not have got that. I would definitely not have got that. The Pilegesh of Eliphaz. Who was Eliphaz?
Son of Esav.
Son of Esav, correct. Okay. Right. So let's just recap what we've said here. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, don't think that all 70 judges or all 23 judges or 71 judges even have to know the 70 languages. Not possible. Correct? That's what we all said. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, in a place as big as Beitar, there were only 3. And in a place as clever as Yavne, there was only 4. And these were the 4. Now, so that's good. Now, Meitvei, I will ask you a question, says the Gemara. There's another Braita that says Shlishit, a Sanhedrin that has 3 people who can speak all 70 languages, is called Chachama. Is called wise. In other words, it means it's a good Sanhedrin. It can work. It can function. Revi'it, if there are 4 persons, a 4th person comes along in a Sanhedrin and can speak all 70 languages, ein lamala heimena. There is no, it means there's nothing better than that. That is as good as it gets, okay? As good as it gets. And Rav Steinsaltz adds, meaning that there is no need for additional language experts, okay? So, now we've got a problem because we've just said, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, that a Sanhedrin needs to have 2 people that can speak and 1 person that understands. And this brisa seems to contradict that, because it says it needs 3 people who know how to speak. So we have a brisa against a brisa. Okay, so how are we going to get around that? And so what do we do, everybody, when we have 2 things that contradict each other?
First, we try to figure out why we're misunderstanding it, that they don't just contradict each other.
Okay, that's one way of dealing with it. Okay, let's say we do that, and we can't.
Who said which?
Let's say we can't figure that out. We've just got 2 contradictory statements. How do we deal with that?
Then you want to know who
The older
said
one.
what their reason was, and who said which. Which individual Amora said, which one Tama said which.
Okay, so I think both of you are saying who's the more senior opinion. Okay, that we could do that. There is another way we could deal with it, and it's something.
Look for another source.
Ah, thank you, Avril.
You can hear me now. I'm on my iPad.
I can hear you now. You're back, and we can hear you very nicely. Thank you. Yes, gentlemen, you have all said this morning. How many times have I said that? And it's usually the same thing. What have you said this morning to support Avril's theory that we need another source to help us out?
The 13 attributes.
Yes, the 13 hermeneutical principles. When was the last time you used that word in everyday conversation? The 13 exegeticals, another way to describe it. Amar Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Bishlosh Esrei Midot HaTorah Nidreshet. Now, last week we spoke about the first one. Remember, a Kal V'chomer. What one am I referring to now? And it is probably the one that you should know the best, perhaps after Kal V'chomer, because it's the one that you actually hear somebody say.
The last one.
The last one. Very good, Michael. And what is the last one? V'chein shnei ketuvim hamachachishim ze et ze ad sheyavo hakatov hashlishi v'yachriya b'neihem. What does that mean? You have 2 psukim. This is talking about psukim, but you have 2 psukim hamachachishim ze et ze that contradict one another. Ad sheyavo hakatov hashlishi, until we bring a 3rd pasuk, sheyachriya b'neihem, which decides between them. So you've got opinion A and opinion B. You have to look for opinion C to see which one it's going to support, which is exactly what Avril said. So that's what the Gemara does right now. So he says over here, he says, don't worry about it. Da'ama ki hai tana. There's another one, the Tanya. There's another brighter that says shnia chachama. Remember, this second brighter said shlishit. 3 is considered a wise and functioning Sanhedrin. 4 is considered wow. This 3rd brighter that comes along says 2 is a chachama, 2 is a wise and functioning one. Shlishit ein lamala hemena. 3 is a wawa. So the Rav Yehuda Amarav has a support for his position from this brighter. So there we go. We have.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
The first opinion came from Rav, did it not? The second opinion, we don't know who it came from.
Yeah.
And the 3rd one, the supporting one, came from Rav. So it's 2 opinions from Rav. Is that?
Where do you see
right?
the 3rd one of Rav?
Rav. The Gemarah answers, Rav states his opinion in accordance with the
opinion of the following Tana. So Rav is relying on this Tana. It's not that he's saying that. he brings it out of his back pocket.
Yeah.
He says, don't worry, look at me.
Yeah.
I've got a brighter here from somebody else that supports me. It's not him saying it.
Okay, fine.
But if it was him saying it, you would be right. It would just be him saying the same thing twice, which you can't have. So you're right. But this Detanya is a brighter, an unnamed source. We know what a brighter is. A brighter is the things that didn't quite make it into the Mishnah, but still have great power. So we've now dealt with the issues of the 70 languages. We go right back to what we said at the beginning. It appeared, well, at least it appeared to me anyway, that it appeared to me that everybody had to know the 70 languages. You were all much cleverer than me when you thought about it and worked out that it didn't need to be 70. Julia was the cleverest of all of us because she intuited that it should be 3. And that seems to be the opinion, either 3 speakers or 2 speakers and an understander. So 3 people at least. So Julia was correct in her interpretation there. And that is the end of that little subject. And now we are going to have a sidetrack here. We just learned about Shimon HaTimni. This Shimon, who may have been a Temanite, but seems to have come from Timnah, and he sat on the ground before them. So we are going to now, on the back of that, explain the meaning of various Gemarah terms that you will come across when we eventually learn other Gemarahs, perhaps in another lifetime. But anyway, these are expressions that you see in the Gemarah, and it's going to explain who these people are. So the Gemarah tells us now, this is very much parenthetically, not to do with our subject matter, just as a matter of interest. There on the right-hand side of the page there, under background, Rav Steinsaltz tells us exactly what we said before about sitting on the sages would sit on a raised platform, such as a few pillows, and then the important disciples would sit in front of them on the ground, and the further back your seat, the less important you were. So when the Gemarah says Lemeidin lifnei chachamim, when the Gemarah says, as it does in various places, it was learned in front of the sages. Lemeidin, from lemed, to learn. It was learned in front of the sages. Who are they talking about? They're talking about a statement from a particular chacham whose name was Levi. He's just called Levi. I don't know who he is. I tried to look him up, but I couldn't find him. And sometimes Rav Steinsaltz gives us a thing about people, but he doesn't on this occasion. So I don't know who this Levi was. I couldn't find much about it. But if anybody can find something about this particular Levi, I'd be happy to hear about him. Levi mi Rebbe. This is, when it says it was learned in front of the Chachamim, that is code for it. This is a statement from Levi, who learnt from Rebbe. Now we know who Rebbe is, don't we? Who's Rebbe? When it just says Rebbe without a name, who does that refer to?
Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. No.
Yes, Johnny, excellent. Yes. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the editor of the Mishnah, just known as Rebbe. Okay, and so, by the way, there is that is a precedent, by the way, for giving the title when you just say somebody's title and everybody knows who you mean, right? When you say Rebbe, everybody knows which Rebbe you mean. You mean Yehuda Anasi, as Johnny just said. In modern Orthodox circles, if you were to say the Rav, who would you be talking about?
Rav of the Yoshul.
No.
Or your community.
You might, but that wasn't what I meant. There's
the Rav of your following. You know, like there's The
in a
Belzer
small
Rav.
community, that would be true. The Rav
Yeah.
said. I'm talking about in the modern Orthodox world. If you were to go to any modern Orthodox yeshiva and you were to quote the Rav, who would you be quoting without saying his name?
The Rosh Yeshiva.
No.
No.
David, I'm sure you know the answer to this.
The Maggid Shir. No. Maggid Shir. No.
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 Dave?
Rav Soloveitchik.
Yes, Rav Soloveitchik.
Oh.
Of Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, Rav J.B. Soloveitchik, who was in some ways the father of modern Orthodoxy. He is known as the Rav. Okay, so in modern Orthodox terms, if you speak about the Rav, everyone knows you mean Rav Soloveitchik. The Rav says that's Rav Soloveitchik. If you say Rebbe, everybody knows that's Rebbe Yehuda Nasi. If you say in certain circles the Rebbe, okay, in certain circles you would know who that is. And if you were a Lubavitcher Chassid and you said the Rebbe, everybody would know who you meant. If you were a Gemarah Chassid and you said the Rebbe, they would know who you meant, the Gemarah Rebbe. So you're right in a way, Johnny. Your answer wasn't incorrect.
Yeah.
But the broader term, Harav, the Rav, in modern Orthodox terms, is Rav Soloveitchik. Okay, now just digress on that. So
just go back to the Timney. When he said he was deliberating in front of the other judges, what did he actually deliberate? He sat on the ground in front of them, or on the front row. Was he helping to translate because he knew the languages?
Possibly, but he would have challenged their thinking. He would have said, "Hang on a minute." He would have raised a question. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
Okay, the teachers, the Rosh Yeshivas, are there giving the shir, right? And the guy in the front row, who's a top student, says, "Hang on a minute, Rebbe. What about this? What about that?" And the Rebbe says, "Oh, you know what, Shimon HaTimni, you're right. You've got a point. I need to go back and think about that." So he was these front row students, as it were part of the development of halakha, the development of the psak. They were involved in the process. They weren't yet at the stage where they would make the psak halakha, but they would be involved in the process because they would be, as it says, Dan. I don't like the translation deliberating, actually. Dan, they would judge, yeah. They would be involved in the whole process of psak halakha. Julia, you're muted.
Sounding boards.
Yes, sounding boards. Yes, they were act as sounding boards. That would be a good description as well. So,
shuls in England, the United Synagogue shuls, you walk up steps to where the rabbi sat, and remember.
Correct. The rabbi is on a
higher up than the congregation.
Correct. And this is all sourced in this idea that the Chachamim were on a raised platform or higher level, and the students were down below. So when it says in the Gemarah Lemedim Lifnei Chachamim, it means Levi learning from Rebbe. When it says Danin Lifnei Chachamim, a slightly different expression. When it says judging or deliberating in front of the Chachamim, that means various different people. And he gives a few answers to who it must be. Now, without looking, who must one of those be? Well, we've just said it, haven't we? Shimon HaTimni Dan Lifneihem. So when it says Danin Lifnei Chachamim, that means one of these people must be Shimon HaTimni. And that is why this is here, this whole little digression. But it's interesting that the first opinion does not include him. When it says Danin Lifnei Chachamim, says the Gemara, it means Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, Chanan HaMitzri, Chanania ben Chachinai, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Oh, full stop. Yeah. So that's them. 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak matnei chamisha. The second opinion on what this expression danin lifnei chachamim means is from Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak, and he adds a 5th person. And who is that 5th person, do you think? Shimon HaTimni. He has 3 Shimons. Can you see? Shimon, Hanan, and Hananya. The first one had 2 Shimons, Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, and then Hanan and Hananya. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak adds in Shimon HaTimni, the 5th one. And that is why that's why this little section of Gemarah is here, because we mentioned Shimon HaTimni sitting in front of the Chachamim. So you would think, okay, we've dealt with that now. Let's get back to the Gemarah. Oh no, we haven't finished yet. There's a whole bunch more of expressions in the Gemarah that this Gemarah is going to explain what they mean. So when it says the expression Rabotenu Sheba Bavel, when they give an opinion from our rabbis in Bavel, who are they referring to? Rav and Shmuel. Who are Rav and Shmuel? Rav and Shmuel were the main antagonists, I suppose. That sounds a bit of a negative word. They were the main people who, in the Talmud Bavli, their opinions were often opposite to one another, a bit like Hillel and Shammai. Rav and Shmuel were often disagreeing with one another, and they were the main rabbis in Bavel. So when it says Rabotenu Sheba Bavel in the Gemarah, it's referring to Rav and Shmuel. When it says Rabotenu Sheba Eretz Yisrael, when it refers to the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael, it is referring to Rabbi Abba. When it says Dayane Gola, when it says the judges in the diaspora, that is referring to a particular Talmid Chacham called Karna. I looked all of these people up on in Wikipedia, and there is some information on all of them. If you're interested enough, you just need to go into Wikipedia and have a look who they were, where they lived, etc. It's quite interesting. When it says Dayane de Eretz Yisrael, if the Gemarah says the judges of Eretz Yisrael, that is Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, 2 of the main judges in Eretz Yisrael. Dayane de Pumbedita. Where was Pumbedita? It's a great name.
It's in Babylon.
It was in Babylon, yes. There were 2 or 3 main centers of learning in Babylon. In England, there are 3 main centers of learning, aren't there? There's London, Manchester, and Gateshead, right? Not Leeds, Julia. They're not a center of learning. Okay, the 3 great centers of learning of England: London, Manchester, and Gateshead. Okay, well, there were 3 in Bavel as well. What were they? Pumbedita. Next. Nahardia is the one that Art's about to say. Trying to say. And the 3rd one? Sura. Well done. Okay.
No, I'm reading it.
Oh, okay. So, oh yes, it's there. So the Dayane de Pumbedita, that's Rav Papar bar Shmuel. The Dayane de Neharda'ah, the judges there is Rav Ada bar Minyumi, and Sabe de Surah. What's Saba? Who here is a Saba?
Me, my grandpa.
Yes. Saba means a grandpa. It means an elder. Okay, the elders, because the Saba is the elder of the family. So Sabe de Surah, the elders of Surah, who were they? Rav Huna and Rav Chista. The Sabe de Pumbedita, the elders of Pumbedita, was Rav Yehuda and Rav Eina. Now, the next one's interesting. Charifei de Pumbedita. What does charif mean?
Strong.
Strong? Yeah, it's strong in what regard?
Taste.
Yeah, if you have something that's charif, it's spicy.
Spicy.
Yeah. So if you say to somebody that somebody is charif, what does it mean?
Clever.
Again, sorry, Art.
Clever.
Clever, yes, but clever in a certain type of way.
Sharp.
Sharp, exactly. Sharp. That is the word that was in my head. If you say somebody, oh, he's charif, he's sharp, like a good schug. Yeah. If you have a good sharp schug, which you put on your food, you know about it because it's sharp. So the sharp ones of Pumbedita, these were Eipha Va'avini B'nei Rachva. Two brothers, by the looks of it, sons of Rachva. They were sharp. Amorai de Pumbedita, the Amoraim. Who are the Amoraim? Generally, when we say Amorah, who do we refer to? And the Amoraim are
the early sages.
The sages of the Gemarah time.
Yeah.
What are the sages of the Mishnah time called? Tanaim. Yeah, Tana and plural Tanaim. Okay, so who were the Amoraim of Pumbedita? Rabba the Rav Yosef. And the Amoraim de Nahardei was Rav Chama. Very nice. We now know who they are. If you want to know a bit more about them, you can Google them. So let's just do a little bit more. I'd like to try and get to this little S today. So let's just get to Nahar Balai Matnu. So if it says they learned in Nahar Balai, that means Rami Bar Barabi, the son of Barabi. Amri Bei Rav, if it says, the Gemara says it was learned or said in, what is Bei Rav? What does Bei mean?
Yeshiva, your school.
Yeah, the house of, like Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai. Bei is Aramaic for Beit, for house. So Bei Rav is the house of Rav. So if it says Amri Bei Rav, if it says they learned this in the house of Rav, they mean that's Rav Huna. But then the Gemara says, hang on a minute, that can't be right, because we have a statement of Rav Huna that says Amri Bei Rav. It was learned or said in the house of Rav. Well, if that means Rav Huna, why would he say that? It can't be him then, can it? If he's quoting, it's a bit like what you said before, Julia, that you can't have Rav quoting Rav and bringing a proof from himself. So Rav Huna couldn't bring a proof from himself. So Amri Bei Rav, so that means, okay, you're right. If Rav Huna says Amri Bei Rav, he means Rav Hamanuna. But if it just says Amri Bei Rav, it means Rav Huna. This doesn't really mean a lot to us, this, because we don't know any of who these people are. It's just interesting to know what the expressions mean. Now, another expression you see in the Gemara, Amri B'marava. It was said in the west. Where is the west?
In Israel.
Why is it in the west, Art?
It's west of Babylon.
It's west of Babylon, correct. Ma'arav. If you say about Ma'arav, it means the west. West of Babylon is Eretz Israel. So if you learn in the Gemara, it says Amri Bar Ma'arav, they said in the west, that means Rabbi Yirmiyah. That means him. Now, what if the Gemara says Shalchu mitam? They sent a message from there. Where's there?
Yeah.
Where would they send messages from, and where would they be sending them to?
Israel to Babylon.
From Israel backwards, back again.
Israel to Babylon. Why not Babylon to Israel?
Because that's there and here.
That's there and here. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. That's a fair answer, because we are learning the Talmud Bavli, aren't we? We're learning the Talmud of the Babylon. And if it was the Talmud Yerushalmi, it would be the other way around, according to you, Art, right?
I believe so.
Okay. So, yeah, but generally speaking, the Babylonians would send messages to the Eretz Yisrael Chachamim for either to to ask shilas or to give their opinions. And shalchu meitam, send it from there. That means from Eretz Israel. Who are we talking about? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. And what about the statement mechaku ala b'ma'arava? Mechaku ala b'ma'arava. They laughed at it in the West. Why would they laugh at it?
I thought it was a ridiculous argument.
So that's right. So they send a psak halacha or an argument or an opinion from Bavel, and it gets to Eretz Israel, and they laugh at it and say, "What a load of nonsense that is!" And they start laughing. That is Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar did not accept the opinion. He would laugh about it and say, "What a load of nonsense."
No, Yossi bar Chanina. I know Elazar, yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi Elazar. Okay. But now we've got a similar question that we had earlier on. The question we just said, if it says shalchu mitam, it means Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. But we've got an expression in the Gemarah that says shalchu mitam ledivrei Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. They sent it from there in the words of Rabbi Yossi Chanina. So we've got the same question. Can't be that he's quoting himself. So ela epuch, it's the other way round. Shalchu mitam is Rabbi Elazar. Laughing at them is Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. They just switch those two people around so that it fits. And there we go. There we have it. We are now closing the brackets, and we will go back. We'll just do a little intro because we've still got a couple of minutes. What have we done so far? We talked very interestingly about how many people really need to know the languages. The reason, by the way, still holds, and that is that at least some, and Julia's idea that at least 3 judges could understand the testimony in its original form. It's very different that the rest of the Sanhedrin hear it from their colleagues who heard it firsthand than hearing it from a translator who might not be bear no resemblance to what the guy said in the first place. So at least we've got 3, and that was the first important bit.
It's lost in translation.
Lost in translation, absolutely. And we said that even in a huge place like Beitar, there were only 3, and even in a clever place like Yavna, there were only 4. And then we went on to discuss all these different expressions and who they mean. All that lot was on the back of Shimon HaTimni because he sat on the front row.
Can I just ask, would people who are studying this as a full-time occupation actually remember and know what we've just read? Because it would take me forever to get my head around all that.
Yeah, I guess so. But let me ask you this question: when you were learning for your legal exams, and you had to learn all the different case law that you had to learn, Jones versus Smith, right, or whatever, right?
1953.
I would look at that and think, wow, how do you remember all of that? I can quote the 2 cases that I quote all the time, which is Fry and Barnett versus Bolam and Montgomery versus Lanarkshire Health Board, because those are the 2 that I deal with all the time in my work. But you and Avril and all these clever lawyers have to remember all these cases. So we would ask the same question. So yeah, if you're doing this full time, if you're learning in yeshiva, and somebody said, who's Rebbe Elazar? Or what does shalchu mitam mean? Yeah, they would know. Yeah. I'm not saying every yeshiva bocher would know, because most of them don't know diddly squat. But, the serious ones would know.
It's like the pin test.
Yeah. The pin test, stick a pin in and say, right, now tell me what's that about. It's the same with me when I had to learn my anatomy. You might look at all these different nerves and the route that they take through the body and say, how on earth do you learn all of that? Just hit the books, don't you? And you know it because you're learning it all the time. Okay, the last minute or 2, let's just introduce next week's topic. It won't be next week, I'm away, whenever the next time is. V'chama yehei ba'ir v'hei ru'uya leSanhedrin. How big does a city have to be for it to require its own Sanhedrin? Because we said right at the beginning of the Mishnah, way back in 2019, we said that a city requires every city requires a Sanhedrin of 23. Now, what constitutes a city? That is what we're going to discuss next time. It's really interesting. If you don't want a spoiler, then don't read on. We will do next time the idea of what constitutes a city, how many people, and how that number is arrived at, which is really interesting topic. I thought we might just get a go at that today. So I was reading it up earlier on, and it's very interesting. So hopefully next time we will do that. Any questions on today's shiur before we go? Next time, I don't know when it will be, whether it will be next week, the week after, I'll have to let you know because I'm going away on Sunday for a period of time. Any questions?
I was just going to say before, you know, when it said that not everybody needed to know all the languages, I assume that was applied to all the other characteristics, because they had to be men of wisdom and they had to be beautiful. So I assume that all the characteristics didn't have to be in each of them. It just had to be a selection.
I don't think so, Avril. I don't think so.
They all had to have all the other attributes, but there was just the langues that...
I think so. That's how I understood. That's how I understood it. That's how I understood it, because if we go back to I have to stop the screen now. Let me go back to the screen and show it you again. If we go back to where we were talking, where it was 70, the only one it actually gave a reason for was the 70, and that is so that the Sanhedrin should not hear it from the translator.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can do that with Julia's 3. Okay. Because they can hear it from not a translator, but from their colleagues. Now, what was the reason? I don't think you were with us. What was the reason they had to be tall and good looking and clever?
Yeah.
Because that was for respect purposes. And you certainly can't say Balei Chochma, that you don't have, they didn't all have to be wise. Well, you're going to have just 3 wise people and 68 idiots.
No, it's pleasant appearance. That was one of the things I was...
Yeah, no, the whole point about appearance is you have to be imposing.
Okay, yeah.
That was the reason given. You weren't with us when we learned that, but that was the reason given for the appearance. Okay, you know, if you've got some kind of Nebuch-looking hunchback there, the litigants are not going to be impressed. Whether we like it or not, we are impressed by imposing looking people. If you remember, Johnny, we spoke about Alan Singer being the American president when we make our film of Poleg. He's going to have the role of American president because he looks so impressive and so imposing. So yeah, I think, Avril, that it's that the 70 languages is the only one where they don't all have to have it, and that's logic anyway.
Wait, that's what I wanted to clarify.
It could be Baalei Kshafim. It could be. That would work with the witchcraft one. Maybe they don't all need to know witchcraft. Maybe there's only a small number of them need to know the witchcraft, so that they could say to their colleagues, in the same way as they could say about the languages, hang on a minute, that's dodgy, that's witchcraft. So you could be right that the Kshafim one could be that they don't all need it. The Gemarah doesn't say anything about it, but that's a possibility. But the appearance one is definitely, they all have to have that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, see you all. Whenever I see you, have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.